The GW4 Water Security Alliance runs a weekly seminar series. It features a guest speaker each week aimed at stimulating discussion and knowledge exchange between academics, researchers, water professionals and students. And these seminars are hybrid where possible, but are always accessible via Zoom. We hold them every Thursday at 1 p.m. So you can register via Eventbrite, and you can view all our past seminars as well on the Water Security Alliance website. If you are a member of the Water Security Alliance ECR community interested in chairing a session, then you're more than welcome to contact us on wsainfo@cardiff.ac.uk. So today we're delighted to be joined by our speakers, Mr. Fernando Lopez Aguiar and Dr. Alberto Abella from FIWARE, who will be sharing their recent work they'll be doing with FIWARE for water. Talk will be in two parts, with the first by Fernando on cybersecurity management in the deployment of SW solution in the water domain, and then that will be followed by Alberto, who will ask the question if we can standardize data at market speed, looking at smart data models program for water. There will be an opportunity to ask some questions if you have some at the end, so you can leave them in the chat or just raise your hand. So yeah, over to you, Fernando.
Okay, thank you for the nice introduction. So I assume that you see my screen. So my name is Fernando Lopez Aguilar. I am FIWARE Cloud and Platform Sharing expert in the FIWARE Foundation. The purpose of this presentation is to show the different cybersecurity action plans that we developed in the execution of the FIWARE for Water project, and how that is translated into the FIWARE community in order to increase the security of the architecture, components, deployments, and so on and so forth. Basically, maybe you know better than me that in the current days we have a serious, let's say, problems regarding the cyber attack in the water infrastructure. In fact, we have some example of cyber security hearing from the chairman Tom Carper in the Washington DC, in which it was mentioned that there is a real cyber risk in the top threat facing the US water sector. In fact, it was identified like one of the targeting of the, let's say, Russian government in the multi-stage intrusion campaign. And also in the last months, Minister Michael Regan, in response to the President Biden's initiative, mentioned that cyber threats become more sophisticated. We need more coordinated and modernized approach to protect the water system and support the access to the clean and safe water in America. Why is this, let's say, identification of the management of water and the security issues about water? Because we have in the short past, we have a serious attack. Probably some of them was developed by their own workers. Like we have in case of this increase the chlorine or shut down the cleaning and disinfecting procedures and make water potable in the Kansas, or increase the chlorine levels in the water flooding to resident areas during cyber attack against Israel water system, in which this was some, let's say, parallel attacks between Iran and Israel in terms of water supply. Also, we have the 2020-21 this change of the threshold of sodium hydroxide from 100 to 11,000 per million in the drinking water, and also the serious problem in Norway, in which was shut down the water and water treatment facilities in 200 municipalities, which produce that 85% of the population, Norwegian population, wasn't was not possibility to access to the fresh water during 2 days. No? This is just an example. It's not a matter of if we receive some kind of attacks in the water treatment, wastewater management. This is a matter of when. Why is this a serious issue? Because we see that the critical infrastructure means system and assets here. No? But in parallel, we see that there is a translation of the IT departments in order to move towards microservices architectures in which we wanted to deploy services on hybrid clouds with end-to-end automation. This is let's say, a good approach in terms of facilitate the deployment of a new solution and deployment of new version and correction of error. But on the other way, this is a source of create serious vulnerabilities in order to, because it's possible to introduce blind spots, which can increase the risk of attacks in cyber criminals in order to find any kind of foothold in the architecture. In order to prevent those kind of risks, it is needed to apply standards through definition of specific data models and use of specific APIs, like we propose in the FiWare architecture, and also best practices in cybersecurity in order to prevent or mitigate any kind of errors or any kind of intrusion that we can detect in the solution. Of course, like I mentioned, this concrete water sector action plan, like was mentioned by President Biden in the United States, should be also applied in Europe or any other country, have to outline a specific real actions in order that should take place to reduce or mitigate the issues or the identification of security issues and risk in the water management, wastewater, water cleaning, and so on and so forth. What is the purpose of the FiWare for water? We have identified, taken into account that the FiWare architecture of FiWare components, the deployment of those components are based on cloud and Docker image. We propose to create a management of cybersecurity risk in a cloud native environment, following the 4 C's of cloud native security, which cover the security of the code during the implementation phase, the security of the container during the testing and deployment of the component, security of the cluster when we are talking about the deployment of a specific architecture based on the FiWare components or based on any other kind of components, and finally the security of the cloud. So in FiWare for Water, the project, we define this security software development life cycle process in which we take care of all the stage from the design, development, testing, deployment, and recovering requirements based on identification in each security issues identified in the different components. Starting for the security of the cloud, in the development stage, taking into account that currently, if we take a look on the surveys that we have on the market, we can see that around 80% of the code base have components that more than 4 years out of date, which is a real serious security issue. And also 79 or almost 80% of developers never update third-party libraries on their code, which is a serious problem because from time to time we can see new vulnerabilities that was identified in version of the library that we are using in our products. So it's something that have to be very careful and have to apply the corresponding action plans in order to mitigate or to produce new versions and deploy new version to correct those problems. Of course, it means that we need to make some kind of dependency scanning process in order to mitigate these problems since the beginning. It means when we started to develop any kind of solution, we started to develop a new version of components. We need to detect in real time any kind of vulnerability that we introduce in our products or in our system or in our architecture. In order to do that, in the development stage, we can use static application security testing, SAST, in order to help us to identify any kind of security vulnerability. So in the Fiber Forwarder, what we did is that we developed a procedure in order to make a security scan every month, and it's something that can be configured to execute by requirement every day in order to test the code, the repository, and also the Git logs in order to find any kind of hard code secrets in the development stage, like passwords, APKs, tokens, etc. We recommend, or we use the Git leaks tool with a recommendation to install the pre-commit GitHub or GitLab in order to prevent to upload any kind of secrets in the repository, in the code. And inside the Firewall community, we make a periodic review of those results each 8 weeks in order to identify any possible issues in the technical steering committee and take decision about the resolution of those issues. Talking about the security of the container, we are talking about the testing stage. We have developed a new version, we have developed a new components. Now we create the corresponding Docker image in order to test, or Docker image in order to put in production. So what we say that is containers is widely used in web services based application due to the portability, easy to use, deployment, and execution. But security aspect of the container have not been addressed from the beginning, and there is no large surface left for attack. There is no large surface based on attack. So what we did is, or usually the security specs suggest to recommend perform security scanning for third parties containers or base image and libraries in order to prevent the transfer of vulnerabilities into unexpected security flows. No? The recommendation here is to follow the NIST, in that case the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure Database, CVA, that is updated every month or every week as well, with new vulnerabilities of different components, different libraries, different operating system issues, and also so on and so forth. And also the information that we can recover from the different operating systems like Red Hat, Ubuntu, and Debian about vulnerabilities identified in the different library components of the system. Following the recommendations of the security community, we implement, in that case, 2 Docker security scan tools based on Clear and Anchor in order to spend periodically as well the CVA vulnerabilities during the security testing and code review. You have here a summary of one of the components and the score based on CVSS version 2. As well as we recommend Also, we configure the development of GitHub Action automatically in order to automatically scan the vulnerabilities of all versions of the components of the FireWire catalog and the FireWire for Water components in order that we keep an update overview of the security status of each of the component. You can take a look on them in GitHub. As well as we did with the SAST, we made a TSC, in the Technical Steering Committee, FireWire Technical Steering Committee. We make a review of the identified issues, security issue, in order to prevent vulnerabilities and make a decision in order to put in the short-term or medium-term roadmap any functionality in order to resolve those security issues identified. And last but not least, we provide, let's say, in the guidelines of the FireWire components, recommendation to sign the container image in order to maintain a system of truth. The next level is the security of the cluster. This is the deployment stage in which here the issues that we are talking about, the service hosted in one or several virtual machines and connected with a virtual private network. So the action plan that we put in place is that, okay, we need to follow the best practices in security configuration of microservices, access management, as well as security interconnection. Here, the recommendation that we put on the table is to follow the different components that we have the FireWire architecture in order to provide authentication, granularity of different roles, applicate with management over the cloud management systems, as well as the proper configuration of those services, isolated services connected through security way. It means that the recommendation that we put in place in production environment is to define a network policy definition, because with this network policy definition, it's very easy that we can control the security relation quickly and produce faster response to mitigate any security issue. And last but not least, the encryption of data at rest in databases for sensitive and confidential data, because this is a very computational cost procedure, and this is only recommended for sensitive or confidential data. As well as we put in place the configuration of Docker Bench security analysis over some typical Docker Compose file in order to automatically analyze the best practices around the deployment of Docker containers in production. This is also a procedure that we generate every week or demand if some owners wanted to get more update information every day. This is based on the SysDocker Docker benchmark version 1.4.0. And last but not least is the security of the cloud. Here we have to differentiate the security in the cloud that was mentioned in the previous slides, and the security of the cloud. That is the security that the cloud provider have to offer in terms of applications, sharing data, and store intermediate or final results into disk. It means that involve action to secure the overall cloud computing environment against security threats. Also require a trusted computer system, which contains only hardware and software components of a trusted computing base. This trusted computer base is composed by the entire security and file system. The rest of the system components not executed under user mode. The majority of the system program is installed with privilege. Any other tools used by the administrator of the operating system or the cloud environment in order to maintain data relevant to this TSV. So the last point is that all of the identified issues that we mentioned in the testing of the code and checking the vulnerabilities in the cloud image, Docker image around the production environment, is translated fast forward to the TSC in order to generate the corresponding feature roadmap of the firewall component, firewall generic enablers, in order to create a new version of the components to resolve the identified security issues. Critical and high issues are redirected as soon as possible in the community, and the rest of the identified issues are translated in the short-term, medium-term roadmap of the components. That is all of the short introduction of the security aspect that we put in place in the firewall community developed in the Firewall for Water project. So at the end of the session, if you have any question, I am very happy to answer them. So let me stop share my screen and translate to Alberto. Presentation. Alberto, the floor is yours now.
Yes, do you hear me? Hope so.
Yes.
I'm going to put presentation mode. Let me share the right screen. Okay. Do you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Alberto Abella. I work for the Firewall Foundation. And today we're going to review a bit what's standardization and data modeling for water. This is the index for today, but I'm going to start with a small reflection about why standardization is meaningful, is necessary in this sector, possibly in many others, but in water specifically, and what's happening right now. And then I'll present the Smart Data Models program, how we implement the standardization, the Agile standardization practice, and then some data about how is the status of the program and how to participate in it, including a tiny demo about the available services. So why do we have to standardize? So I'm here just reviewing the concept of standardization with three elements. The first element is that it's a process. Usually in the standardization bodies, we have a very well documented process for creating standards, which is something which is very nice because it's quite predictable and you know how to get involved. So it's a nice. This process is guaranteeing some kind of consensus of the industry. So supposedly most of the agents involved in or affected by the standard will be or will have their voice to be heard in this standardization body. Okay, the point of these two elements is that this consensus and these procedures takes a lot of time. And the outcome is a technical definition. And this technical definition don't have usually a requirement to have available implementation or examples. And I'm sorry to say that there is plenty of standards around there, not only in the water sector, I mean, in general. Now we have the standard, but nobody's using it. Why? Because they haven't tested the standard against the reality of the actual needs of the market. So what are the limitations specifically in a digital market? And now we can consider the water sector as deeply involved to the digital market because now we need to be more efficient, and being more efficient means being digital, and being digital means that you are in the digital market. And therefore, the process for generating the standards are not always open. In fact, most of the standardization bodies charge you for the standards. I'm not criticizing this because they have to live on to something, but this is something that we have to take into account. And of course, you cannot customize the standard for your own needs. And therefore, you take the standard as it is or not. That's all. And the consensus is a process which is lengthy and even not only for the creation or even for the reviews. So it's something which is not meeting the actual market speed of the digital market. And of course, what is also another limitation is that imagine that you are a small company or a large provider, you need a new standard because you are developing a new service or something like that. What do? Do you contact with the standardization body and trying to launch this standard? So it's something that few entities are capable to do. And last but not least, as I've mentioned before, the technical definition of the standard has usually some flaws and limits or even some points which are not suitable to be used in actual markets. And this is what we are living. And what we propose is to change this. As a result of this way of standardizing, we can define 3+1 scenarios. The first scenario I defined, these are my words, it's not an academic term, the jungle. So there is no standards. Everybody do whatever they want. So there is no compatibility. And if you want to connect with external data, you need a translator because there is no way of sharing data without any adaptation. As a result, for all the sector, not only for one of the members of the sector, you have to define your own standard or your own data model. You have to implement translators. And of course, whenever you have to interchange data, you need quite a cost of data acquisition. There are some other scenarios when usually the incumbents, so the main players of the market are competing, they are releasing their standards. Usually they are not open license and they are attached to their tools. And the specification could not be complete because these incumbents are, let's say, preventing their industrial knowledge to be shared by others. As a result, you have several competing standards, usually not compatible at all, and you have the cost of the standard, which is from the incumbent, and you have to make the translators, the adaptators between different data sources. And the last scenario, which is the best, is that from time to time, some of these standards win the market. So the market is massively adopting one of them. And this could result into a monopoly, okay? Or sometimes these incumbents release the standard as open because they already have the market, and what they want is that the market will be the larger, the better. And with that, you have to focus on business problems and not in the technology to access data. So the standards is really working. I have a bonus, which is when the standard for using, which is something that happens in the water sector regularly, is done by a public regulation. Usually this is mandatory, so there is no option if you want to play in this market. What we find is that it's quite common that they're not providing the finest details, so that it's telling you have to do this, but it's not saying how to do it or how the data will reflect this thing that you have to do. And of course, if there are different administrations in different countries, in different regions, you can face that there are different standards, somehow incompatible one with each other. So again, you will be ending with that the implementations are not compatible because they are following different regulations, and you have to pay the cost of the translators and the cost of acquisition. So as we can see, the standardization at digital markets could be a real mess. And what we provide is, or what we propose is to go for agile standardization. And what is it? Agile standardization is basically standardize things based on use cases. Okay, and to reduce the consensus, not because consensus is bad, not at all, but we cannot pay in a digital market the cost of taking 2 years or 3 years for releasing a standard. This is something that the market, the digital markets, are not capable to accept. Of course, if you are doing these things and you are doing based on use cases, you will have some kind of limitations. And of course, you will be forced to do more versions than in a classical standardization. But this is not actually a problem as long as the standards are not backwards incompatible. Of course, possibly you won't be able to do a so extensive documentation about the standard, but possibly you don't care. Okay. And what we say with the agile standardization is not something which is replacing classical standardization, but is somehow complementary. Let me show you some of these aspects. So with agile standardization, we can meet the market speed. So if we need something, we can do it during the project execution, like in the research and development projects. Of course, as long as we are based on use cases, we have examples. And when you have examples, and I'm saying this by experience, the discussions are absolutely much shorter. Why is that? Because you are seeing something which is already working. So quite an amount of the bugs, of the problems has already been faced. And there are reasons why the solution is this, okay? It is true that with agile standardization, we can go on time. So we can do this agile standardization based on the first use cases, so, and we can evolve as quick because we don't have so lengthy procedures. And of course, you can think, oh, so whoever is willing to do an agile standardization, then will create something, and then we have a problem even larger than with the classical standardization because we are producing a much larger amount of standards. And this is not the case because another point of agile standardization is not to reinvent the wheel, but really, not saying that. There are lots of comic strips saying, oh, what happens when you create the 15th standard in order to make compatible another 14 existing standards. What happened that you have 15 instead of 14, so which is, you make the problem worse. So in agile standardization, we have to remember that we have to be very quick to go for the adoption. If a standard is adopted and it's open, why not using it? And last thing is that the content of the agile standardization has to include a technical definition, examples, eventually exports in some other formats, or discussions, or the documentation translated into several languages. So if we see this into a market, we can see that in the left part, imagine that you are in an emerging market or in a research project. So if you have to wait for the standardization body, you can see on the left, in the upper left part of the image, that you can take months or years. So your project will have ended or the emerging market will have developed without any standard. If you go, on the contrary, if you go for the agile standardization, you can have in a week something which resembles a full standard and that you can start using and start sharing before or while the full standard by the standardization bodies is done. And of course, this once you have this agile standard, then you can go in days, it's published, and you are ready for go to the market. And of course, what is good would be just the standardization body, take this agile standard, take as a basis and create all the procedures and all the consensus around this standard. But once you have a market following the standard, design let's say an alternative or something which is against this standard is rather costly and possibly useless. So what we do is that we put the seed of the standard, but good enough in order to go for a classical standard, but without paying the cost of that the market has dispersed between different initiatives. In the scenarios that we saw there about competing standards, Jungle, and so on. So with having said that, that agile standardization is kind of an alternative or complementary to the classical standardization, I'm going to introduce the Smart Data Models program, which is an initiative for implementing this agile standardization. Well, these are the 4 organizations currently managing the initiative, which is the TM Forum, which is a large telco association, Open and Agile Smart Cities, which is an association of smart cities across the world, IUDX, which is part of the Ministry of Home Affairs of India, and the FIWARE Foundation, which is a non-profit association headquartered in Germany, but with activity all over the world. So what we provide at the Smart Data Models program is data models, which are multi-sector. So we have, of course, the water sector, but many others, okay? Based on an agile standardization, and everything that we do is free and open license, meaning that it's free, of course, no cost. You are free to use it as much as you can. You can modify, you can customize to your needs, and you can share that modifications. And the point is that these data models are based either on actual use cases or on open standards already adopted by the market. So what do we provide in terms of standardization? In the Smart Data Models program, we only go for the semantic part. You can see in the interoperability that there are several layers, and in fact, there will be several other layers, the logical, the functional, and we provide only the standardization at semantic. So there is also a level at the API level of the connection that we don't care. So we are not paying attention to that because it's done elsewhere. So for us, the NGSI standard is the API. Is the API standard, is standardized by ETSI, and we don't have to provide nothing. But in the Smart Data Models, we provide serialization of the data models in different export formats. We provide the definitions. These definitions, sometimes they are coming from the open regulations. And we provide a list of the data types of the attributes of the fields of it's composing our payloads related to water. Okay, so we say if the temperature has to be a number, it's a number, not an array, not a string, not an object. Okay, so we try to guarantee that when you are receiving an attribute named temperature, you know what is happening. So you know that it's going to have a number and not anything else. And we currently have in 6 languages that translated the documentation, which are English, which is the base, and German, French, Spanish, Italian, and Japanese. So how can you profit from the Smart Data Models program? There are 2 main sites. One is smartdatamodels.org, which is the main site in which you have updates. We'll visit just in a moment. And we provide their services for the contributors, apart from the updates that are addressed to anybody. And we have a technical repository located in GitHub, at the Smart Data Models GitHub, where we have 50, in fact, there are more, but there are 55 repositories for all the data models that we have there. So in these repositories that located there, you can take the link. So there are subjects. Subjects are groups of data models. In example, water distribution is a subject, and inside this water distribution, there will be several data models. And every data model is a folder inside this repository. It's worth to be mentioned also that there is an incubated repository. What is this repository for? It's for the people who are developing new data models to be able to collaborate with others. We'll see in a moment. So what can we find in every data model? We can find the content, the specification. You are seeing just in a very tiny font, a part of the specification with all the attributes and its definitions, and in these 6 languages. We have also examples, and this is the list of examples in several formats, and we are exploring to export in other formats because our goal is to have data models and to be useful for anybody willing to use them. Not only for those who are using FIWARE platform, of course, Yes, absolutely. But for others like DTDL, GeoJSON features, CSV, and so on. And last but not least, we have the single source of truth, which are the schemas. The schemas based on JSON schema, which is kind of a way of documenting data models based on JSON. We have in the same document a JSON payload which is capable of validating the payloads that we have in our systems. Okay, but also the descriptions are there. So the documentation that you saw before and the rest of the deliverables are based on this single source of truth. So whenever this source is changed, automatically is launch a process which regenerates all the documentation, guaranteeing this way that there is no misalignments between the documentation and the technical specification. So, and let me just do a quick browse through the site. I'm going to make it smaller, and we have here this in the main site of Smart Data Models for examples. Let me okay. I'm going to the main site, and I'm going to show just four services. The first service is search. This search is for looking for any data model that we were willing to look for. And we can look for the name of the data model, for the group of data models, for the data type that this attribute is willing, or for the name. Imagine that we are looking for something related with water. I don't know what's going to happen yet, but here you have, let me scroll down. We have 29 attributes which has water in the name. So water table, let me some of them, which is from this one from Open Channel Management, water inflow. So we can click here and see what is in the data model. So we can browse the documentation, which is always in the doc folder, and it's describing every attribute of this data model. Here there is a technical specification in YAML, and here there are 4 examples of using this data model. So we in the Smart Data Models program, we don't provide anything else regarding documentation, but this is possibly covering 80–90% of your needs. Another point that I want to show you is that imagine that you want to go exactly for a specific data model. We have an option here, the list of data models. And if we are willing to look just for the name, for the subject, or for some tags, so we can look for water here, and then there is a filter, and all the data models they are belonging to a subject called with water, could appear here, and then we can click and visit. Okay. The third service is how to draft the data model. And for that purpose, I'm going to take this. Imagine that this payload, which is in JSON, is something that you have in your system, and you want to explore if you will be capable of creating a new data model. I'm just copy, and going to the main site. Sorry, this is not the main site. Here we are. And go draft the data model, generate your schema out of a payload. I'm going to include here the payload. I'm just pasting. I'm going to include name. And as you can see, the type of this payload is water quality observed. Okay, what's going to happen when I click there? Okay, so I have to speed up. It is detecting that this data model already exists, and it's also providing you the link to the specification. So imagine that instead of that, we're using just another type, water quality observed 2, which is slightly different. It won't be recognized as a same data model. And when we go here, it is creating, let me enlarge the outcome. Yeah. It's creating the data model, is taking the definitions of these attributes from all other data models that are in the initiative, and is providing to you. So you don't have to document if this is already documented in some other data models. So just out of your payload. And the last thing that I want to show you is how to create automatically examples, but I'm not gonna do in order to accomplish everything which is in the presentation. Let me go back again to the presentation. Sure. Oh my God. Yeah, here we are. Here we are, yeah. So what's the current status? We have 35 directly related data models with water. We'll see later that we have more that can apply to. We have also in total 792 data models, and there are 97 on the queue. So we are close to have 900 between those who are already published and some others which are on the queue. What else? And we have around 18,000 terms to be searchable for you already documented. Now we are documenting every adopter of the data models, and we have 109 cases. Of course, if you are a contributor, you get credit, and you will be published, if you wish, of course, as an author of a data model. So this is what is currently available. There are 35 data models, but there are several other data models which are related. Why are they related? Because they are coming from projects of water, and they found out that they need these data models also because the projects of water are not only water related, they are involved in many things, and there are some others coming from the energy footprint of water management and these kind of things. So it's no longer valid to say, oh, I have a standardization for water and that's all. No, you will need possibly regarding weather, regarding satellite imagery, so the observation of the land, or for risk management of these kind of things. And we provide everything on that. How to participate? To participate, we have a contribution manual that you can visit. It's on the front page. And we have a learning zone with some videos and some tools. One which is mandatory is remember that all of our data models are released with an open license. In order to do that, you have, when I mean you as a contributor, you have to give us permission. And therefore you have to fill a form for it. And we provide extensive support. Most of the Mondays, we have a live session at 2 p.m. Central European time. There's also a green button in the front page if you want to announce that you are going to go for a new data model. And these are some frequently asked questions. I only want to point out the last one, that this organization is having 4 members of the board, but this is something which is open and other organizations could be joining soon. And the last point is the ways of contacting with us. You have the web page, you have the mail, you have a Twitter account, which is tweeting every time, twice a day, some data models. We have a Slack channel, and of course we have a LinkedIn group and our repository at GitHub. So I guess that is basically, I've left 5 minutes for questions, if possible. And thank you very much for being there.